there's the plaza. Here's the south building. Up here is the north building. And the reason I'm showing you this kind of disconnected piece is to show you what used to happen in 2022. The Hardscape tool was built differently. And so this, and it was built so that a hardscape was intended to align with adjacent stuff, whether it's a slab or the bottom of a wall or what have you. And the problem I had with that is you end up with these comets. And I had this all kind of worked out cleanly. And then when 2023 came around and I opened the file, I ended up again with this. And I sought advice, and to my wonder and amazement, Vectorworks had reimagined this tool, and it's much better and easier to use. I'm going to show you how that works right now. So that is, as you might imagine, you go to render after not having worked on this for like a month, and somebody says, oh, I want you to make a little quick change and then give me a rendering. And you go to the file expecting it to be ready to just make a quick change. And this is what you have. It's kind of a freak out. But what we have instead is this. Okay. Doesn't that behave nicely? Look how nice that is. And so here you can see all the grades are working. The slab in question meets this other slab nicely. It meets the landing to this ramp in the back. It meets the landing to these stairs in the back very nicely. And it meets that landing. And without belaboring the point too much, I will go back here and say, in the old days, what you needed to make sure that this was some object that the hardscape knew how to align to. And in some cases, you needed to add something like that little line there is a three-dimensional thing solely for the purpose of Vectorworks catching it and seeing it, and the hardscape knowing to align to it. What a pain in the neck that is, when instead, so how do you do that? So let's just look at this in plan and I'll show you. Okay, so, and I'm going to zoom in, and you'll notice that this is all around the perimeter. There are these grades, and this is key to the ADA accessibility exercise, right? What are the slopes? Look at that, 2.8%. It says so right there. Look at that. It hits right there at the landing, and we know that that landing is at 538 foot 6 inches, and so it meets beautifully, no controversy at all. How did we do that? So the way you do it is now simple, and it is based on this idea where you have the object info palette for a hardscape, and at the bottom there are surface modifiers, edit surface modifiers right there. Okay, and surface modifiers are stake objects and grade objects. I'm going to turn off stake objects because I don't use stake objects and you don't want to use stake objects. And so here's what happens. You edit surface modifiers and you get the perimeter, and the grade object is right here. And that's what each of these things are. They're all grade objects. And I was keyed into this by the Vectorworks person who's really expert at this kind of stuff. So, and he's the one who said, don't bother with stake objects, use the grade objects. And the wisdom of that is you get a perimeter that has all of these important grades all around the perimeter, and you can know what they are because it says so right there. So from a workflow standpoint, you can do all of your work within this hardscape itself. not having to go out and saying, well, what is the top of something else? And is it going to link to it? And what about that comet? And where is it? And all of that. So that's what's really happening here. Also, these grade objects are part of a network. So if you change the grade of this one, it will automatically change the grade of that one. So the network is your friend. Okay. So again, that I'm in the edit surface modifier space. So that was kind of a situation that I had to get out of that. So there you go. And that can be used infinitely, and it does some things that are bothersome to me. Like you see this little red barber pole here around there. I'm just going to offer an opinion on that. And my opinion is I hate that thing. And I don't ever want that to be part of my projects. What I want is to be in the space where I can do this here to a hardscape, and all of the intelligence of this hardscape is right within the hardscape itself. It's not relying on aligning to anything else. Vectorworks still wants me to hit the realign button, which is this red thing. And fortunately, when I do that, it doesn't go haywire. It behaves itself because this odd shape here is also built on the grade tool. Okay. So anybody have any questions about that so far?
Yeah, Al, can the hardscape report what the slope is within the field of that plaza as opposed to on the edge? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. So let's do this. Edit surface modifiers. That's a great question, actually. And here's another thing I wish Vectorworks would do is when you click edit surface modifiers, the actual hardscape would stay right where it was when you hit the click and not move off to somewhere else. But let's put a grade tool here. Okay. Let's put a grading thing. Bing, bing. And over here, let's just cancel that and see if we can get this thing to go from here. And I'm going to do 537, 8 feet. And that was the grade right there. That's the elevation right there. Okay. So here are the two elevations. Elevation 1, I'm looking in my object info palette. Everybody see that? Elevation 1, elevation 2. Okay. So elevation 1 was the place I started, and it caught the elevation of this one already. So I didn't have to enter that one. It didn't, for some reason, catch the elevation of this one. I'm not, maybe it doesn't do that when you go cross country like that. But the interesting thing for us all is there's the grade, right? That's pretty cool. There is this other thing. So I'm going to delete that. And
Al?
Yes, sir.
Where did you get the elevation 2 from? Was it at the point in the corner?
Yeah, I was looking, I was reading these numbers.
All right.
And I wish I had been able to read, I wish it had just clicked right on it, but it didn't. And, you know, there's even, you know, now that I see it, now there are 2 of these, and they don't seem to be exactly lined up. You know, there's a little bit of housekeeping going on right here, but that's kind of what I was up to there. Okay. So
Yes.
It's all, relatively speaking, it's pretty intuitive. Everybody's good with that so far? Hearing nothing, I'm going to move on. Okay?
Yep.
All right. So let's try one. Just us guys. Okay. Okay. So I've set this little thing up here. And this is going to be a little exercise. And so we have these green, orange, purple are stands that have different elevations. And we're going to try and create a hardscape that hits each of those as if those are landings that we need to hit. A really common ADA kind of challenge, right? So here's what it looks like. And we're going to try and create a new hardscape over the top of all this, again, so that it hits each of those. And then to add another challenge, we're going to put a drain, a square drain right in the middle, and we're going to hit that little pinky thing, okay, and see if we can get all that to work, okay? So here's how I would do it. Start with a rectangle, go up to AEC, create objects from shapes, create a hardscape. Okay. And then over here under shape, you need to draw 3D. You need to make that a slab. And I'll show you why. I'm going to go none. And then there, now you can see there's a hardscape there. And let me just give me 1 second here. Make the elevation 10 feet. There, 10 feet above the blue thing. And you can't see it because it says none, but as soon as you say slab, there it is, okay? But right now it's a flat thing because down here under configuration, it says planar pad. And you want to turn that into aligned. And I wish there was a better term for it because I don't want this thing to be aligning with anything. I want it all to be within itself, but nonetheless, that's what it needs to say. So Command 5, we're going to look at it from above. Okay, so we're going to try and hit 8 feet, 6 feet, 12 feet. Okay, so starting here, edit surface modifier, grade. Okay, and let's just start by making one right here. There's a grade, and we know that's going to be 96 and 96. Boom. Right here, let's do one here. In fact, I'm going to cancel that to make sure they go in the same direction.
And by same direction, you mean like clockwise around the perimeter of the hardscape or counterclockwise?
Correct. So
Yeah.
I want all the elevation ones to be in the same direction. Okay. So this one is 144. 144. Boom. All right. I'm going to get out of this edit surface modifier space. You see, it says edit surface modifiers, command right bracket, and then hit the 3 button and look at that. Now, here's an interesting thing. Notice that it's aligning with the bottom of the hardscape. That's annoying. So here's how you get rid of that. You go over here and under components, main area components, and there's only one component really, or no components, and you hit top of component. And there you go. Okay. And then you can say to yourself, gee, I really don't want that corner to be all that way, that far down. What are we going to do about that? So let's just clean that up a little bit here for a second. And edit surface modifiers right down at the bottom. And we're going to put a grade from here to here. And you can see that it already grabbed the 12-footer right there. And let's just randomly make that other one 10 feet. Exit that space, command right bracket. And there we go. And so on and so forth. Now let's go ahead and add something in the middle for that drain. Okay, so let's just go ahead and do this. And let's see if that will actually, and it does, it clips a hole in the space, right? Okay, so now let's see if we can control that by zooming in and add a surface modifier, grade tool. And let's just make this kind of random. And we'll do another one. Oh. See if we can get another one to go there. There, and it for some reason didn't like. I can't get it to grab the. I can't get it to grab the existing one yet. Let me try something else. Start from this end. So it seems when it hits the red, it should be acknowledging that relationship. And there, it did it. Okay, 72, enter. 72, enter. '72, enter. Command right bracket, get out of that space. Oh man, look at that. There it is. All right, and then command 5. And you can see, and I could have put a perimeter of a network all around the edge, which is what I would normally do. But I think from a what are the basic principles standpoint, this gives us everything we need to know. So why don't we do what Francois asked before, and let's go ahead and add a surface modifier, a grade tool, and let's go from this corner to that corner. And let's make that corner over here 96, that's 8 feet. Well, no, let's make it an odd one so it's not matching the 8 feet over there. Let's make it 48 inches. Okay. So what we see here is that grade is 3.6%. Exit surface modifiers. And maybe there's something I'm missing here, but I believe this is everything you need to know about hardscapes right here to get these to do what Francois is getting ready to talk to you in more detail about. So you can query them from cross slope standpoint. You can query this from a line of travel standpoint. You can meet various design constraints like purple, orange, green. That's pretty cool, I think. Any questions on this? I can do card tricks if you want me to, but this is pretty much a card trick right here, I think.
Very cool, Al. One last question. Is
Yeah.
it possible to assign classes to the grade objects so that I can display the slope or the cross slope in one viewport, but turn off the class in another? Or are they always in the same class as the hardscape?
I don't know. I haven't gotten that far, but I can tell you this. There is this thing right here. See where it says profiles? See where it says surface modifiers at the bottom? When you say turn off show stake objects, they do turn off. So you can turn them on or off. I can get that far. Perhaps there's a more sophisticated answer to your question. I don't know. I honestly don't even know where I would look for such a thing. That's a good question. For me, though, what I find is whatever.
Do you mind editing the hardscape and
What would you like
assigning
me to
all of those? Yeah.
Yeah,
Why
tell
don't
me
you
what you
edit
want me to
the,
do.
yeah,
Go ahead.
edit the surface modifiers and put them all, say, in the dimension class.
Okay, there you go. Okay,
And
so
now
and now
if you turn off the dimension class, yeah,
let
what
me try that.
happens?
Yeah, let's see. This is why Francois is Francois, and I'm merely me. I don't think of these things. Turn that off. Let's see what happens. That was
Nice.
so there it is. That's the answer to your
Yeah.
question. Put it in
Yeah,
a
yeah.
class.
So you could have a site notes class and put all your
Yeah.
or you could even have two classes, right? One for the ones that you want as control points, like those edge ones, right? You don't want to see those in your CDs, but you might want to see some for the cross slopes. You could even put them in different classes and play with that.
Well, you can do whatever you want, of course. I wouldn't do either of those personally, because what I find is anything that you may have dimensioned or annotated in your design layer is inevitably at the wrong scale when I'm presenting it in a sheet layer. So I have
Fair
a
enough.
tendency to annotate all that stuff in the annotation space of a sheet layer. But that's just me. Anything else? There must be other questions. Oh, if you don't mind, I'm going to comment a little bit further, and then I'll give it back to Francois about this tool. And this is a little bit of my own personal editorial regarding Vectorworks, and part of what I learned when I signed up for an hour of training with Vectorworks's key landscape guy who knows this stuff backwards and forwards. So my personal concern about tools like this is they're so powerful and they're really compelling, and we all want to jump right in and use them. And in my case, I needed it, so I had to use it. But sometimes they're sufficiently complicated to where it's just not intuitive at all. And this idea of the way it was built, where you have to align it with other things. So if I'm working on this and that's the way the tool is built, I have to not only work with the hardscape, but I have to keep in mind what all these other things are that it's supposed to be aligning with, and that can be very complicated. And that's difficult enough for me, but in an office with multiple people and at various levels of experience, it's almost impossible to expect an office would have that capability generally. So my counsel to Vectorworks is make these things simpler and think about somebody who is maybe been out of school for 3 years and has never used the hardscape tool before. Now, to that end, what Vectorworks tells me is they are changing their strategy for building these kinds of tools. Previously, these tools were built on the engineering side, and then they would bring in the design talent to comment on how the tools worked. Now so you end up with these kind of complicated things that really are wonky and make great sense if you're an engineer and that's really the space you inhabit. Now they're working toward a model where the design team is the initial impetus for the tool, and then the engineering team is brought on board to say, with the task, here's what this thing needs to do, here's what how it needs to behave. And I think that's a step forward for Vectorworks to do that, and I would expect this tool to improve. I would regard this tool as serviceable, but could use further improvement, and really, mainly for all of us wanting to use it, it needs to be simpler and easier to navigate. So anyway, that's the end of that. Anything else? You want to take it, Francois? Unless there are more questions, and there really weren't many.
Yeah, I don't see any questions in the
Yeah.
chat, so.
Good, good.
um,
Okay. So I'm going to
all right,
stop
Al,
sharing.
Yeah, that is very cool. Thank
Yeah.
you. Al, I appreciate it. All right. I'm going to jump in here. There'll be a couple of places where I will say, and if I had used the Hardscape tool, this would have been better. So since we were talking about slopes, I thought I'd talk about ramps, sort of a much simpler case of the kind of the hardscape requirement. So there's a ramp tool in Vectorworks. You find it here under your building shell toolkit. I think, yep, ramp right there. And you can see that I've drawn one here. And if we look at it in the object info palette, I can specify a width and an overall height, give it a thickness, configuration, whether it's straight or with a landing or doubles back or whatnot. So it's a little bit like a simplified version of the stair tool, which kind of makes sense. And then of course I can create 3D. If it's a long ramp, I can give it a break, right? And then when I have it all set up the way I like it, I can style it, and so save it as a styled ramp if I have common ramp designs that I use over and over in the project. And so in 2D, that looks something like that. I've got the clip cube on, so you're only seeing a portion of it. There we go. And so this is the ramp itself that I've just highlighted. And then I've just added floors at the end for the landings, just to have a little bit more control. It's not integral to the ramp itself, right? I'm going to go ahead and delete this handrail and turn on the ramp's handrail. And you can see that the ramp's handrail is a literal handrail. Like it assumes that it's going to be mounted to the wall. It doesn't really do much for me, right? So what I've done is, this is an old file where I use the old handrail tool, which is a legacy tool, to just click from one corner to the next. And some of the limitations of that tool is the profile is square. So, you know, if I'm just using this to populate a 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch scale drawing, no problem. But if I want something that's a little more realistic at a larger scale or for a rendering, may not be exactly what I want. But I've gone ahead and give it parameters, what the top rail and the intermediate rail width and heights are, what the spacing is, and so forth. And then I'm required by code to have a handrail extension for 1 foot. Right, and the handrail tool does not allow for that. So in order to meet that requirement, I've just got another little handrail here. It's its own handrail that I've just made tiny, 13 1/4 inches, and positioned it so that it's at the top and the bottom. Now, if I want a slightly better looking handrail, I might use the new or newer fence and rail tool, which is here under my furnishing and fixtures palette. So there's a railing fence tool. And one mode is you can draw these as a polygon in plan, in which case it'll be level. But if you need this on a stair or a ramp, you're going to want to use the 3D line mode. And then you just snap from one end to another, and it'll draw a handrail for you. So for example, I can go from here to here, and it'll create it whatever default settings you have. And there's quite a few settings. So if you look at that, let's look at these settings. I've got some general configurations, so I can assign a class to it, make it 2D or 3D or both. There are some pre-made railing configurations right out of the box, either for metric or imperial units that you can use. For the top rail, I just have 1 1/4 inch, but this one I've made round because I can. And for the start and the end extension, I've made those both horizontal. I'm sure you're aware that code requires 12 inches, and I've only made this 6, and I'll get to that in a minute. And you can see that I've deselected that the top rail ends at the post, and that's to allow for that extension. The post itself is, again, 1 1/4 inch round. I've placed it roughly 3'9". So approximate distance or exactly fixed distance, it'll kind of work itself out. And I can make it a custom height, say 3 feet. And then for the infill tab, I've got just a top bar, or I could do a bottom and make it taller. You know, I've only got 1. So I've just got the top. And again, I've made that round, 1 1/4 inch in diameter. And then I don't have any intermediate bars here, right? This is just a very basic rail. Then for my 2D attributes, I've got class controls over all of that, and likewise for the 3D. So if I want it to be in one class in a top plan view, but then a different class to show a material in a 3D view, I can do all of that with the rail. And so there it is, right? And you can see that for my returns, I've just got a little 3D symbol. So the way I built that is that's just an extrude along path. So there's my path right there that I just drew as a initially just drew as a rectangle. I turned it into a polygon, removed one edge, and then filleted the corners. And then the profile is just a circle that's 1 1/4 inch. So then I just snap those to the ends of those posts, right? And if I use my X-ray mode, I can snap to the center of that, and then snap to the circle so that it's nice and seamless. And then, you know, you can see those in comparison. So, you know, there's probably a way that I could have sort of done the same thing, where instead of making this an extrusion along path or a symbol, and then this a handrail, I could have had that stop at the post, and then basically made a little 1 foot by 1 foot handrail. Might have been a little tricky to get those radii there. Not sure how I would do that. So in this case, in the interest of a more sort of a higher fidelity model, I went ahead and made that a symbol. So I guess the moral of this little vignette is that you know, it's sometimes useful to mix and match different tools. Now, obviously, you know, if I had had Al's help, I would have done this whole ramp assembly, and you know, maybe it turns the corner and so forth. There's a compelling case to be made for making that ramp itself as a hardscape object, right? Instead of using the ramp tool. But don't feel just because the ramp tool comes with a handrail that's what you have to use, right? It's okay to use the fence and railing tool to make a more custom railing. And the same thing goes for stairs. I don't have an illustration of that, but sometimes you're better off just letting the stair tool build the stair structure itself and then coming back with the fencing and railing tool. The railing fence tool in this 3D mode, 3D line mode, to manually sort of trace from nosing to nosing or tread to tread or wherever you want your guardrail for your stair. So let's see. Any questions about that?
Francois, when you snap to the corner of the ramp and up one side,
Yep.
is that railing actually sitting inside the ramp, or is it
Straddling it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I initially, there's a couple of ways you can do it. It initially was straddled and I just did a move, but you can also offset it. You can offset from the path. I don't know if you can see that right there. So if I wanted to offset it 2 inches, boom, and then the path is still where I snapped, and so then it would be inbound 2 inches.
Thanks.
Yeah, you bet. All right. So switching gears, this is just simple as a box of rocks. And I have Dwayne Mann who to thank for some of this. I got some of these symbols from him, gosh, years and years ago, and they're just so useful when laying out commercial spaces. I just use them all the time on commercial projects. First of all, it's okay to make a symbol of a 5-foot turn radius, or an alternative, a wheelchair turn path. That sounds like really basic, but it's kind of a nice time saver to have a circle with a crosshair so that you can easily spot the center and just move it around. And then I've got a class for my ADA guidance. That's an ADA or a guide -ADA class, where I give it a particular dash and even sometimes a opacity. So that's just its very own class. And in this case, here's a simplified version of Dwayne's symbol, and here's a more comprehensive version. So each of these rectangles represents the clear floor area that's required in front of a door, and then the arrow corresponds to the color of the arrow corresponds to the color of the rectangle. So somebody just kind of like went through the whole ADA TAS code and just got all the required floor clearances on the pull side or push side of a door, with or without a closer, depending on whether the direction was swing side, front approach, latch side approach, and so forth, and just made this little symbol. And so you just kind of lay everything out and then start plopping it over all, snapping it onto all of your doors, and then you immediately know when it's time to move a wall or move a door or both. And that's it's a nice little time saver. Again, it's very obvious, very basic, but just a great little thing to have, these kinds of little jigs to make things have the correct clearance, so you don't have your RAS tell you when you're done with your CDs, hey, you forgot this one door, and you're gonna have to change your whole layout because you messed this up. Same thing with fixtures. Sometimes I take in residential as well, not just commercial. I'll have a clear floor area of 30 inches by 24 inches in front of the leading edge of a toilet, just as a rectangle in this ADA guidance class. or for water closets, right? Or sinks on the commercial side. Just build that right into the symbol so that as you're laying it out, you immediately know where things need to go or not. And then for the labs themselves, sometimes when I feel like I really need to overachieve, I might build a little symbol. I don't know where that went. That's odd. Anyway, this is just a solid extrusion as a symbol, and I've just dimensioned it so that you can see that I've got all the clearances that I need for my lav. Now, most of the time you're just going to take a lav that the manufacturer is, has flagged as being ADA compliant, and then you don't really need to check these things, hopefully. But sometimes you may want to do a custom, undermounted sink within a counter, or something that's maybe a little more custom, or you want to see if there's a particular sink that you can adapt, either with a standoff from the wall, or some little counter that you integrate with it to meet the requirements. And so just having this little symbol that you can kind of tuck up in there and locate to make sure that you're not violating any clearances, it's nice to have in design. And obviously the dimensions are just there for me to illustrate and demonstrate that I'm complying with the TAS or ADA standard. You wouldn't necessarily need to include those within the symbol itself. So another little trick that's kind of nice is using the associate dimensioning capabilities in Vectorworks. So let me go ahead and delete that dimension and go to my document preferences. So under my document settings, document preferences, under dimensions, right, by default, I can associate and auto-associate dimensions. So when I do that, it's probably a good idea for me to snap to this actual point here of the lav, and then I'm going to snap over here to the end of this door. And I'm going to go ahead and put that dimension not in the dimension class, but in my guide ADA class, just for my own benefit. And so when I do that, obviously the dimension is reporting that I've got 6 inches, and that's not great. So I can just double click on that and click on that point and hit, say, the 18 that may be required. And now I've got the clear area that I want in order to be compliant there. And so I'm putting that dimension in its own class, kind of like my question to Al about having the hardscape modifiers within their own classes, so that this is just a sort of a controlling dimension that I'm just using as a design dimension. But in my documentation, that might be in a class that just gets turned off, or once I'm satisfied that everything's in the right place, then I can go ahead and delete it. Little less sexy perhaps, but another way of doing this is to use the set position function of the door in the wall. And then I can just snap from here to there. Vectorworks reports that it's 6 inches, and I can make it 18, and then the door moves accordingly. I guess what I like about having the dimension there is that I have immediate visual evidence that everything is as it should be. I don't need to inspect it or dimension it. It's right there in the drawing, sort of telling me that everything's good. Let's see if I can make that work in 3D. Yeah, so same dimension here. Not sure if this will work, but we'll give it a try. Yeah, there you go. So, you're not limited to making that change in plan. It'll also work in 3D. Obviously, in order to snap properly, I had to have laid that dimension down in a top plan view. And then, grab bars are sort of a perennial favorite. There's a couple of options here, right? I've got the grab bars that ship with Vectorworks. In top plan view, they look like this, right? And so I've got those assigned to the class that I want, my material stainless steel class. I can have one or two. In this case, I have a side and a rear. So that's the side, that's the rear. I can specify the length for each of those, as well as the height above the ground, and what the offset is from the corner. But then if I have something like this shower where I needed 3 grab bars, right, then I just went ahead and added another one and just didn't show grab bar number 1, just had grab bar number 2. So basically I just took this pair of grab bars that are one object, mirrored them, and then just turned off the longer grab bar, right? So like this. Huh. Interesting. That's kind of weird. It's very weird. Oh, there we go. Using the wrong workspace command, right? So I just mirrored it and then just turned off the longer grab bar. Boom, there it is. So very easy to do, right? Whoops. There we go. The kind of the thing that, depending how picky you are, is that those grab bars are basically just extrusions of the what the profile that you see in plan. So they're not round. They're not, in other words, as models, they're not very detailed. Right? So if that's what you want, then there's a way to do that. So this is an auto hybrid. Here's a 3D component. Let me go ahead and render that. I think I have my clip cube on. That's what's going on here. So here I've got a symbol that actually contains 2 other symbols. So here's the grab bar, there's the toilet, right? And that grab bar is in fact a symbol. And if I look at the 3D component, you can see that it's an auto hybrid. So an auto hybrid allows you to take some 3D geometry and automatically generate the 2D geometry that you would see in plan. So if I just double click on that auto hybrid, there's the 3D geometry. And I'm just extruding a long path. I don't know why it's showing up twice. So I'm just taking this round profile and extruding it along the path in order to get this continuous grab bar. If I wanted to get really detailed, I could certainly add some detail to my model. Say draw a circle here and change the diameter to say 2 inches and extrude it by, I don't know, 1/4 inch. My extrusion's going the wrong way, so I'll turn it around, put it in the stainless class. Right. And then I could add one at the other end if I wanted to. The auto hybrid's going to generate. So you can see it's showing that escutcheon, that end. Then when I get out of my symbol, there it is. Right. And then I could have an insertion point that respects the thickness of my finishes and so on and so forth. Easy enough to do. Since grab bars tend to be fairly uniform, you know, it makes sense to go ahead and just make this as a symbol. There are some occasions where you might need to change the length of the grab bars, but oftentimes they're just very standard lengths. So it's nice to have a plugin object, but a symbol version that isn't sort of as flexible for the runs is not a bad solution. And of course, I've carefully mirrored the toilet so that the handle is on the open side of the room, not up against the wall. And then while I'm in here, I've got this little linear drain in the shower. This was another instance where the hardscape would have been kind of a nice solution. But you can see that I've got a bit of a slope built into this down to my linear drain. So the drain itself is just a floor object. And all I've done is I've taken this polyline, or started life as a rectangle, drew a rounded rectangle here that was the correct dimension and just arrayed it, and then clipped it so that I had this polyline, which I then turned into a floor. Maybe I've got two of them. I do. That's why I was getting that sort of visual artifact. So, if you really want to get a little too detailed, then you probably should in your modeling. And then for the drain itself, right, this is the benefit of using a slab object. Here's a slab for the foundation itself. And one of the things that you can do with slabs is draw some 3D geometry and subtract that from the 3D components of the slab. So if I just double click on this slab and look at the modifiers, you can see that I've modified a whole bunch of things here. Let me turn off the clip cube and right. So I've got these chamfers. These are all of the voids between my grade beams. But then here's the solid addition that I made for the slope of the shower. And the pocket for the drain. Probably could have just done that. I just did an extrusion. There we go. So I just did a couple of a multiple extrude. I probably could have just drawn this profile and then extruded it instead of making it two objects, but who knows what I was thinking at the time. And so that's another option that I have that, again, could probably get really close to this just with the hardscape. Wouldn't get the chamfering at the grade beams, of course. But that's another matter, not really an accessibility issue at all. So that, I think the moral of this story is that, accessibility, it's kind of a many-pronged sort of thing, and you may need to use a variety of different tools in order to help you along with that, those design requirements, whether it's plug-in tools like the ramp or the handrail or the grab bars, or more customizable tools like an extrude along path that populates an auto hybrid that's part of a symbol, right? There's all sorts of different ways to achieve it. And since, of course, the whole goal of accessibility standards is that they are standard and standardized, then, you know, it's after you've done a couple of these, it makes a lot of sense to start building up a library of parts that that makes your design life a lot easier. Kind of breeze through that a little quickly, and we have a little bit more time. So if I can catch my breath, and if anybody has any questions about any of these things and you want to revisit, pipe up, please. I see nothing in the chat, so I'm assuming that you guys can still hear me.
Yes.
All right, well, that's pretty much what I have for today. Al, I really want to thank you. I think Al may have had to left for a meeting. So anyway, that was the hardscape that was very easy to yeah, pun intended, to grasp that. So appreciate Al's doing that and showing that. And if anybody has any questions afterwards, just, you know, shoot me an email.